Aloha. Thank you for watching the Fontaine Factor. Tonight we have an exciting show tonight about renewable energy and Hawaii's energy independence. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I have two incredible guests on this evening, and I'd like to introduce. First, to my immediate left is Maria Tome. Maria is with the Renewable Transportation Energy Program Manager for DBED. And to her left is Mr. Peter Rosegg.
Yeah.
And you are with Hawaiian Electric Company. In your position?
I'm a spokesman, corporate communications.
Okay,
Right.
Terrific. Well, thank you both of you for coming on tonight.
Great to be here.
Yes. Well, as we just headed off the show with, tonight is about Hawaii clean energy, and this whole initiative of trying to get Hawaii to be self-reliant on 70% of renewable energy. This was a program that was actually started, I believe, under Governor Linda Lingle's administration.
That's right.
To hit the goal of being able to get to renewable energy by 2030. How are we doing with that? Are we on track to making that goal?
Yes, actually, we're a little bit ahead of the statutory requirements for 2010. Of course, once 2015 comes along, you've got a separation of the efficiency and the renewable part of the goal. So renewables are supposed to be 40% of our electricity generation portfolio by 2030, and efficiency is supposed to be about 30% of the total by 2030, which doesn't mean you sit around till 2029 and start. We're working very hard right now to keep those projects coming online, and the energy efficiency side, of course, needs to move out immediately.
I always compare it to climbing Mount Everest. You know, you're going to spend a lot of time in the foothills, getting up to the base camp, and then the final assault is the most exciting part, but you can't really begin that until you've done that gradual rise. So we're about 2 years in, and we've made a lot of progress. Most of it having to do with regulations and the way we work with the Public Utilities Commission and the state. But we are starting to see, for example, here on Oahu, there's a new wind farm. There was an expansion of geothermal on Hawaii Island. We're starting the program for electric vehicles. So I think starting about now, we're going to see more and more what I call steel in the ground, things, actual programs, and the energy efficiency, which is kind of invisible, but is very, very important, as Maria said, is also building. And without that, we can't really get anywhere near the 70%. So it's always hard to show progress when you're making something disappear, but that's what's happening, and we're moving along nicely.
Now, we were talking earlier before we started this show, a little bit of the issue in terms of, you know, the upfront costs of having to go towards renewable energy. And especially in this economy, you know, people are thinking this is kind of a hard pill for us to take. You know, I remember when some legislation was passed, I think a couple of years ago, about you know, the mandatory installation of solar water heating on the roofs of new construction, and I guess it's also remodeling as well. I'm not sure, but there was a requirement that if a new home was purchased, that it had to have a solar water heater. And people were upset because they said, oh, you know, this is going to add to the overall cost of the home, and it should be a consumer's prerogative as to whether or not they want to put solar water heating. And I guess we're going through the same thing now when we're looking at the wind farms and other things that are going in, and what those overall costs are going to be to the bottom line ratepayer and the taxpayers of the state. You know, I think everybody kind of wants to have this sense of having immediate relief, like somehow by putting in all these things and doing all this stuff is going to make my electric bill go away eventually. And as we've talked and discussed, we know that's not really going to happen. So maybe you could explain a little bit to the viewers how exactly this is working. You know, we have a wind farm on Maui, and we haven't seen our electric bill go down. And a lot of people are concerned, like, well, why didn't it go down? So maybe you could touch upon that.
Sure. It's a hard thing you do expect things to, like the new wind farm there, a second one coming in, a third one over on the Ulapalakua Ranch area, and you look to your bill to go down. And frankly, that's probably not going to happen. But you have to understand that if we didn't do all those things, the bills would be going up much higher than they are now. You look at the gas station where you see that the $100 a barrel cost of oil reflects $4.50 in gasoline prices, and energy prices, electricity prices follow that. So if we don't do all these things, if we don't make the investment, and it's not easy, it's a difficult commitment to make the investment now, in the future we're going to be in much worse shape because every predictor we know of says oil is going to continue to go up. It's at about $100 now. A war in the Middle East or any one of a number of things could happen, and that could be $150, $200 a barrel. So if we don't protect ourselves, we're just going to find our electric rates, as our gasoline rates, are set at OPEC headquarters or by the exporters of oil and not be at all under our control. Whereas if we put some money on the table now and help these companies build the wind farms, build the geothermal, build the biofuel and biomass, then we're going to protect ourselves in the long run. And our kids are going to be in better shape, very frankly, and it's got to be seen as that kind of investment.
And I think I've heard it explained as a portfolio approach. You don't want to have all of your energy provided by the one resource of oil. You want a diversification of your resources. So if oil prices are going up, you can have a certain hedge against that when you have installed your wind and your solar and your geothermal and hydropower and ocean energy devices, because those have been built and you're paying a fixed rate to pay off that investment, but the fuel, which is the wind and the sun and power of the ocean, is free. So you have a hedge for that portion. And I think, for example, on Maui, the one wind farm, that's a 30 megawatt wind farm on a 200 megawatt grid. And if you've got a capacity factor of, about 40 or 50%, you're offsetting what, about 7% of your energy.
It's an important contribution, but it's still a small one.
And so it's growing. It needs to be growing and coming from a variety of sources. And we need distributed generation. The solar on homes is wonderful. Put your solar water heater on first, and then do your photovoltaics, because to heat water, it's much more efficient to use the sun directly. And also the other, we're looking at small wind as well as some of the other resources that are available on various properties to be able to be used on site. And then of course there's always a need for the central station power and also the utilities management of this grid, which is a very interesting area and where Hawaii can be an example to other places in the world.
Now, Maui Electric and Hawaiian Electric, they've been around for many years. Have you had a sense of a corporate viewpoint in terms of this? Because I know, like any large company, change comes slowly.
Sure.
You have people who've done it the same way for 20, 30 years and are resistant to change. What has management been doing to kind of step that up and to kind of get things moving more fluidly?
It's a great question. And I think if people who lived on Oahu for a while may remember 25 years ago, there was a wind farm at Kahuku. The company got very heavily, when the first oil crisis came along, and some of the leaders of the company realized where that was going, or where it seemed to be going, they got very heavily involved. And they built the wind farm, and we were involved in electric vehicles 10, 15 years ago, and we had a lot of other projects. But then what happened very simply is that the OPEC decided to drop the price of oil to the point that it was no longer practical. It just didn't make any financial sense, and customers said, why should we pay the higher rate when the oil is so cheap? So I know there's a reputation of the electric company as being conservative. We certainly are conservative when it comes to keeping the lights on and making sure you get your power. But we've had a strong strain since back in the days of a guy named Dudley Pratt when he was president to really push renewables. And in the last 8 to 10 years, let us say, that I've been with the company, we've seen the price of oil go up. We've understood that the oil is not going to be available. We've seen the world change very dramatically. We now understand global warming and climate change as we didn't back 20 years ago. So I think there's been a sea change. And you're right, when you turn a big boat like Hawaiian Electric, it turns slowly, but we have about 30 people in the company now who are on the clean energy team, directing a lot of other people, but these are all vice presidents, managers, and directors. They're committed to getting renewable fuels, they're committed to getting renewable resources, and I think the impression people may have of the electric company is an old-fashioned one, is an old one that ought to be updated. And Maui Electric in particular, Ed Reinhardt, president of Maui Electric, and the folks there, they've been among the most adventuresome, I think, and they've really pushed it. They've got this contract to try an ocean energy producer up at Poela Point, and they're working closely with the wind farms. They still get power from the Punene, the sugar mill, and they're looking at algae, and they're very aggressively going after all these things. Unfortunately, we're all very, our patience is very, very short. We want to see it now. We want to see it 20 minutes ago. It's going to take some time, but the company has definitely changed from the old days, and the world has changed. That's the most important thing. The world has changed, and we can't continue to run an electric company the way it was run before. Oil is too expensive, oil is too hard to get, it's too much a part of the geopolitics, if you will. So even if we had resistance, and of course people do change slowly, but even if we had that, we have no choice. Hawaii has no choice. If we want to have anywhere near the lifestyle we have today for our kids, we're going to have to get off this oil dependence.
Absolutely. I always kind of summarize it in the sense that, whether we like it or not, Hawaiian Electric is our electric company, and there's nobody else that's going to be providing us power when we turn on the light switch. And so we have to do what we can in terms of renewables to ensure that company and Maui Electric all remain viable industries, and that they can continue to be profitable, but perhaps maybe moving the business model to being more of a transport and storage company of electricity and energy versus just simply providing electricity from a diesel generator. Folks, if you're just joining us now, this is the Fontaine Factor, and I'm Representative George Fontaine, and we're talking with two very special guests this evening who are discussing the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and we're talking about some renewables and some alternative energy sources. And this is Maria from DBED, and then we have Peter here from Maui Electric if you're just joining us. Maria, what is DBED doing? I mean, I know that you mentioned some initiatives of putting in the electrical charging stations in it. Tell us about what DBED's been involved with.
Well, before I get to the electric vehicles, we always start off with the efficiency side. And so one of the success stories that we have within state government, of course, we're very concerned about budgets, and so we're helping the other agencies, and they are actually taking the lead to save energy everywhere they can. And we've actually seen a measurable drop in energy use in many of our state buildings, and so I just wanted to mention that. And of course, consumers also facing high energy bills and concerns about economy are taking a lot of action to reduce their bills, and they're putting in their solar water heaters, they're replacing their light bulbs. They're being very aware of turning things off when they're not in use. So we're seeing a lot of progress there as well. Businesses, same thing. And we're also seeing the interest extend to generation of power on site, and so that gets into the renewable energy piece. And many of our renewable energy resources actually produce energy at night when we don't have as much demand. And where electric vehicles come in on the renewable side is they can use some of that energy that otherwise wouldn't be used. Let's say you've got a wind farm, and let's say at night all that power isn't needed. And if you can actually have vehicles on the grid that can charge their batteries at night, you're displacing petroleum used for gasoline, and you're providing additional income to the wind farm developer. So everybody wins in that case. So for example, we calculated, and if you've calculated it and have a different number, let me know, but about 4% of the personal transportation energy on Maui could be provided by curtailed energy from the existing wind farm.
We'll take your number.
So yeah, I mean, that's a noticeable amount.
It absolutely is.
And the same holds true for many of the other renewable resources.
Here's the clincher on electric vehicles, if I may. We've now got 2 volts and some Leafs in the fleet at Hawaiian Electric. They are more fun to drive than you can imagine. They are very quiet. They don't, because they're electric vehicles and not internal combustion engines, they take right off. They have, they have high torque, and you step on the gas and you go, and they're fun to drive. So it's not like we're asking people to make a sacrifice. These are not the electric vehicles that look like golf carts tooling around the neighborhood. These are, freeway-able cars. They are very comfortable. They have all the features. They are more computerized than you can imagine, and they tell you how you're doing on your use of electricity, how you're driving. Nissan Leaf, if you're driving well, it shows you 1 tree, and if you're driving really economically, it shows you 2 trees, and it really makes driving an interesting experience. So I think as people get a chance to realize that they don't have to drive 100 miles a day because we're on a small set of islands, and they can contribute to the general well-being of the islands by going electric. I think we're going to see a big surge in electric vehicles in the coming years.
So that is a transformative element, and the Department of Energy had some Recovery Act funding that we directing towards transformative elements. So we were able to put in a grant program for electric vehicles, so that'll fund some chargers. We're looking probably about 150 sites across the state within the next year.
Wow.
For people to be able to charge their vehicles. And also there's a rebate program so that purchasers of electric vehicles, while the money lasts,
do it now.
Will be able to get up to $5,000 for the vehicle and the charger. So $4,500 for the vehicle and $500 for the charger. So by the time you add that to the federal tax credit, you have a substantial savings, which is, a good way to get the economies of scale that you need to get for the automakers to be building these. Now, last time we did the electric vehicles, 15 years ago or so, there was kind of a lack of manufacturer enthusiasm. Could I say that?
You may.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have seen Who Killed the Electric Car. So.
Yeah. Whereas now we see many of the auto manufacturers coming out with their vehicles, and bringing them to Hawaii. And so it's an international change, and it's a technological change that I think the day of the electric car is finally here.
The technology is the biggest thing. The battery capacity is huge compared to the way it was 10, 15 years ago. The computer ability is huge. Now you can sit in your car and it's networked, and the car itself knows exactly how it's doing. It goes back to a network which tells the operator of the electric system where that power is, and it's just a whole different world in terms of technology. And I think that combined with the price of gasoline is going to make this a much easier transition than it was before. And there are Nissan, Chevy Volt, Mitsubishi cars are going to be here within a couple of months. Pretty much every car manufacturer has at least one and maybe several electric vehicles in their plans. Ford has a delivery vehicle called the Transit, I think. And there's going to be a remarkable choice as well. When they first came out, you had a choice sort of like the old Model T, any color you wanted as long as it was black. But you're going to be able to choose an SUV or a sports car or a sedan or a delivery vehicle, and you can get an electric vehicle that'll do almost anything. And it's going to be a really transformational change, and Hawaii is in a position to be a leader. That's very important because we can show the world how it's done. Very often when you come to energy issues, because we're these small islands in the middle of the Pacific with these tiny little grids, people can say, if you can do it in Hawaii, you can do it anywhere. If you can change the transportation system here with all our limitations, you can do it anywhere. If you can bring all this extra wind onto the grid, you can do it anywhere. You can add all this solar onto the grid here, and that's what we're working at. It's not easy necessarily. There are challenges to adding a lot of wind power or a lot of solar power because those are what we call intermittent. Obviously, the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. So it's different than a power plant, an old-fashioned power plant with oil where you turn the dial and it gives you the energy you want. So we have to adapt to that, and we're working very hard to do it. And just as you said, Representative, we're changing from a generation and wires company to a wires and service company where we are providing the service to people. Transportation will be one of the things we provide, help in keeping their energy use under control. So we are in the midst of a transformation, and it won't be quick enough for any of us, but it'll be something to behold as we move forward.
I think from the consumer standpoint, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, so to speak, is cost.
Sure.
And I think we talk about these cars and all of them, and there is a big consideration about the cost of these vehicles, of whether they can be truly come down in price to become truly affordable. And then there were some comparisons that were done in terms of showing how even the hybrid vehicles, when you factor in what the cost is, the cost of the battery replacement, which has to occur over a period of time. But
batteries.
But this is what I've read or have heard.
Sure.
And please, that's why we're doing the show, is to get some perspective with this. But that there would be a cost in terms of eventually having to change batteries or to service the vehicle, the initial cost of purchasing it. And in comparison to all that, it was actually, you could get better miles per gallon if you went out and bought a used Pinto, that got 28 miles to the gallon, versus going and spending the money economically wise. So.
Well, the early adopters, I think, need to be appreciated, because when the numbers of vehicles are small and the costs are relatively higher than they will be, they're the ones who are out there enthusiastically embracing the new technology and using it, and also creating the market that allows the manufacturers to scale up the production that brings the cost down. And the innovation is amazing. We were looking at the changes in the automobiles over the past 30 years, and they were getting bigger and faster. Now, that's not something that happens naturally. Usually, if you get bigger, you don't get faster, but they were able to do that in automotive technology. So I think we need to keep in mind that everything is going to be improved as it gets used more and built more, and so we're going to see the efficiencies improve, we're going to see the costs coming down, we're going to see some synergies that maybe we don't even realize yet.
Remember the first cell phones? They
I
were
was just
as
thinking of
big
that.
as a brick,
Yeah.
and they cost several $1,000s. And anybody who had one, you looked at that person and said, you must be crazy to carry that around, to pay that rate. Now, but if they had not, as Maria says, if the first movers and the first adopters had not gotten in and paid that rate, and that was much more odious comparatively than the rate of a car today, because you get a Nissan Leaf for $20,000 with the rebates. But if they had not done that, we wouldn't have $20 smartphones, all of us in our pocket right now, that weigh 4 ounces and that can communicate with the entire world. So I think we're going to see, because of the commitment of all these manufacturers and the development of the technology, and most importantly, the cost of oil. Even your 28 mile per gallon Pinto is going to be a lot more expensive to run in 5 years, when the price of oil has gotten, when gasoline is $6 or $7 a barrel. So we always have to make that comparison, not against what it is today, but what it will be down the road. And everything we know says that oil is going to be harder to get and more expensive, and full of danger, of security danger for us here in the middle of the Pacific.
From an economic point of view, the price of oil going up is one thing people are sensitive to, but the other aspect that really makes us nervous is the volatility, because you can't plan your budgets if you're paying double what you used to pay for energy. You have to cut back somewhere else, which is why very often your oil price spikes are followed by a recession. And so this volatility in the price is especially hard in Hawaii, because we are so dependent on oil. So to the extent we can bring in the other resources and reduce that, it'll be very helpful. And I think of it as, if the energy prices are going up, to what extent can we keep some of that in the state for our own economy? So you want to hit two sides of it. One is you want to reduce the volatility, and the other is you want to develop your local resources and your local jobs to support that. So you had asked what we were doing in with the Recovery Act and in the energy
When you say
area.
Recovery Act, for the listeners, that's from the federal government.
Right,
correct?
right.
Okay.
So we have a bunch of projects. In addition to the efficiency side and the vehicle side, we're also working on permitting, because in order to have renewable energy generated in the state, you actually have to build something somewhere. So we're working with the agencies who provide permits, and we're working with the companies that are going to be going through the process to try to help them understand what permits they might need so that they can get the information together in a more timely fashion. And so we have a couple of projects on permitting there. We're also working on biofuels because there is a great deal of interest in the local production, not just of energy, but also food. And so working with our agricultural sector on how can we support Hawaii's agricultural sector by producing more of our needs in state. And of course, we also have the energy storage. We have projects with the utility looking at how they can incorporate some energy storage technologies onto their grid in an effort to bring on more of the intermittent distributed energy.
I was very excited to hear about Hawaiian HCNS, Hawaiian Commercial Sugar, now going into a project of experimentation with different kinds of crops to create biofuels. And it's very encouraging to see. We really need to have HCNS survive as a company. I mean, they're an important resource. They provide important jobs in our community. And the fact that they could maybe at one day transition into becoming a huge biofuel resource in terms of agriculture, it's some exciting times to live. I think that this age with renewable energies and all of that is the same way when electricity was first invented, you know, and people started putting light bulbs in their houses, and how extreme that was from going through that from candles. And I think we're going through that same phase. Unfortunately, we're getting shoved along by the economy and the oil prices. But I really want to thank both of you. We're getting short on time. It went fast.
We could talk for a long time.
I really want to
about
thank
this
both
subject.
of you for coming
Absolutely.
on, and please keep me posted on everything that you're doing and anything that the legislature can do to.
Thanks for your interest in all your work, because we couldn't do it without the support of the legislature, support of DBED, support of the Public Utilities Commission, and most importantly, the support of the public. And that's all come together in the last year or two in a way that it never had before. So we're very optimistic.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And we'll keep in touch, folks, and we'll let you know as time progresses, as the new programs come online. You can write to me at repfontaine@capital.hawaii.gov, repfontaine@capital.hawaii.gov, and let us know your comments. And again, thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to sharing some more experiences to you in the near future. Aloha.